Good evening, everybody. This is Marty from DawgsBlog, and tonight's podcast on January 17, 2019. It's just gonna kind of be a synopsis tonight. It's the same thing pretty much over and over again. Robert Woody has no recall. He doesn't remember what he said. And Attorney Hans did cross on him all day, and had him read transcripts, had him listen to some recordings this morning if you listen to Noon Report. And so it's kind of the same thing over and over again. And basically that's how it went all day. They talked, the afternoon session actually started at 1:20. She told the attorneys come back at 1:15 this afternoon. The jury was coming up later. And they had a long discussion about whether the waiver that Robert Woody had made in the preliminary hearing, if it was an open waiver regarding attorney-client privilege. Martin Baker had made some type of agreement that Robert Woody would waive his attorney-client privilege so they could get the interview with his attorney that was in April, the end of April, I believe, that was made, and he had made an interview with law enforcement in July of 2016 that said that Walter Wells and Frank Carson were at the scene of the homicide. But in April, he's telling his attorney they weren't. They were not there. He waived attorney-client privilege. There was a private investigator also present. It was recorded, and which was interesting in itself. And they released that interview, which I do have a copy of. It's on DawgsBlog. I'd have to research it and find it. But he did it because Beverly Woody, his mother, was on the stand, and she said all kinds of outrageous things and perjured herself pretty much. And so he did it to protect Mom. Now, there was a long argument over this waiver where it pretty much, the defense was saying it pretty much opened up the door for them to discuss anything that was discussed with his attorneys. Marlissa Ferrer was objected because Attorney Hans was going into an area that was attorney-client privilege and wasn't exactly in just that particular area. Be honest with you, I think Marlissa Ferrer had it right this time. Bruce Perry was on vacation at that time when all these things were going on with Robert Woody, and Martin Baker was Bruce Perry, working with Bruce Perry, and was representing Robert Woody. Bruce Perry had gone on vacation. He was out of town. I think he was maybe out of the country. I'm not sure. And Martin Baker had made this agreement while Bruce Perry was gone, and had even addressed the court and gave a waiver. Bruce Perry got back, and apparently he wasn't too happy with what was done. And Bruce Perry came in, and this is how I remember it, is how Marlissa Ferrer was saying it, that Bruce Perry had said there was a waiver as far as that information in regards to that interview only. Not an open waiver to any type of privileged conversations with his attorney or anybody else that's representing him. And Bruce Perry said they had already had one long hearing in regards to some of this stuff regarding Woody. Bruce Perry even made the comment, and Marlissa Ferrer said that. He made this comment that he didn't want to go through another long hearing. He just wanted to make it very clear what was said, and he did address the court, and I was there when he did it, and I remember him saying this. So that is what it is. So as far as this one particular statement to his attorney and private investigator that was recorded, which is interesting in itself, Robert Woody waived attorney-client privilege for that Martin Baker originally made it an open waiver, but Bruce Perry came back in town and straightened it out and made it for just that one piece of information only. And they were trying to protect Beverly Woody. So that's how I remember it. That's kind of how it ended up anyway. They discussed some other things too, like Woody made some denials of what was going on and what he had been involved with, what the Atwalls were involved with during some of the transportations with Steve Jacobson. That was with Agent Jefferson, who was there to do a polygraph. They can't say polygraph in court. That's not legal. They can't talk about polygraphs. Law enforcement loves to use polygraphs, but it's not admissible in court because somebody believes something is true, they'll pass a polygraph. That doesn't mean what they said is true. If they believe that the sky is pink with blue polka dots, and they actually believe that, they'll pass a polygraph. So it doesn't get to the truth. It gets to what somebody may believe, but that doesn't mean it's true. And during that interview, Robert Woody did deny. He told Jefferson that he said some things that weren't true when in that first interview that he had. As I keep saying, he had been running hard on drugs and alcohol for several days, hadn't had any sleep in several days, and then they kept him up all night trying to get an admission out of him. Okay, we got those arguments out of the way. It was a long discussion. They were doing some research, trying to find the records and stuff. The judge was actually asking everybody in the courtroom if they remembered that, and I wasn't going to stick my hand up because I don't want to get in the middle of that. Martha Magana was actually in the courtroom observing, and a judge finally got to her and asked her. Martha Magana, kind of explained some of it too. So it eventually got cleared up, and she eventually found the sections in the transcripts from the prelim, and it was eventually cleared up. The jury was brought up at 1:56. Hans went on cross again, and again talking about in April of 2000. This says 2014, but that wasn't. That date doesn't sound right. But anyway, he didn't know if Pop and Cork boys did it. That's what he told his attorney. I'm not too sure about that date. It might have been later on. He said he made some of those statements to law enforcement because that's what they wanted him to say. They kept hammering him, and so he finally just started agreeing to some of these things he was saying. That's what he was saying, some of the statements he was making in the past. Remember, Robert Woody has some statements, different stories on the statements. They go back into about 15, 16, 17, 18 different versions that he's told. He's very impressionable, and he's starting to do the same thing on the stand with Hans. You don't know what the truth is with Robert Woody. He had also made a statement to his private investigator by the name of, I think his name was Fanner. He denied any knowledge of what happened to Corey Kaufman. Again, he said he was just telling them what to hear. And some of the things that they mentioned in here, he didn't mention dates, so I don't know when that was said. He said, I told them a story that they wanted to hear. He didn't recall a second visit from his private investigator by the name of Fanner. He read tracks, the transcript to refresh. He did not refresh his memory. This is kind of how it went. He was sitting with Steve Jacobson on 8/14 of 2015 when all the defendants were taken into custody. Apparently, they were kind of paraded in front of Robert Woody to show him that they were in custody, and they were showing they were being brought to the jail. He talked to Dombey and Steve Jacobson that same day. They were asking about Scott McFarlane. McFarlane had complained about his neighbors. Steve Jacobson said, was asking, and he said that was prior to Corey Kaufman going missing. Robert Woody said, "Oh, is it? Like, okay, if you say so." And that's kind of the way a lot of his answers went. Dombey and Jacobson asked about McFarlane and Quintanar. They had called. They had had conversations at Pop and Cork in regards to Corey Kaufman and the thefts that have been going on. And I don't believe that's just Frank Carson. I believe he's saying that there was thefts going on around McFarlane's house, possibly too. I don't really not sure what he's saying anymore. Dombey and Jacobson were feeding him information, not trying to get information. And when they talked about McFarlane, saying that they had talked about Kaufman and the thefts, Woody says, yeah, it could have happened. If you say so, okay, Those are the type of responses that he was giving to the investigators. I saw that entire interview in the prelim, and that's really what happened. That's how he responded. In August of 2016, there was apparently a interview with Jacobson, and said McFarlane wanted to follow Corey Kaufman. What he said he could, I guess he could if he wanted to. He was a CHP officer. They also said law enforcement was telling him that he had made threats to Corey Kaufman. This is the your ass is grass threats in front of Kaufman's house on South Johnson Street. And Robert Woody said, well, it's in the record. That was his response to Hans when he asked him about that. He really didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't recall. And then he said, yeah, okay, all right. He told Dombey he doesn't remember going out there. This was after supposedly they made a milk run, donating some milk to a church or wherever they donated to. Again, they were accusing Robert Woody of not telling the truth. So they said Corey Kaufman, they made threats to Corey Kaufman on South Johnson. This was Dombey and Jacobson both saying this in their interview. He had no recollection of the incident during the interview, and he told Steve Jacobson he didn't threaten Corey Kaufman. Woody said he heard somebody had told him his ass is grass comment. This is at the time. And Dombey said that that he did say it. They're telling him what he did instead of asking him what he did. Woody said he might have given a kind of an invasive answer because he didn't really know. Yeah, could have, yeah, okay, maybe type responses that he was giving. Again, he read the transcript, did not recall. And then they asked him if he heard the audio of the interview, if that might help. So that's probably coming on tomorrow. Steve Jacobson kept telling him, remember the threats and how they happened. They want him to put his mind together and think about it. He said he was a little. He may be a little fuzzy, but he wanted to think it through and put the thoughts together. Again, he read the transcript. Again, he still does not recall. Steve Jacobson, they tell exactly where the conversation and the threats occurred. Again, he's reading the transcript. Again, he does not recall. Then Dombey also told him that they had phone records. And Hans asked Woody if he had a phone during that time. And he said, well, he had a phone, but he didn't pay the bill or whatever it was, and it was shut off sometime around that time, too. We took a break. The jury was sent out at 2:43. We took a break, about 20-minute break. Come back in, and lo and behold, outside of the courtroom, talking to Marlissa Ferreira was Mike Monachia. And he was giving her big hugs, and they were laughing and joking and just having a good time. It's great to see that the district attorney's office has a sense of humor and can be so friendly with Mr. Monachia, especially after she accused the Turlock Police Department of trying to kill him. So we get started back in court again, still talking about that August of 2015 interview. Steve Jacobson going back to his original statement that Frank Carson, Walter Wells, and the Atwall were all involved. Robert Woody said at that time in this interview, he said that was all a lie. That's something he just said, and he doesn't know why he said it. Dombey again said he had phone records. Woody did not recall him saying that. They reviewed the transcript, and he said yes, Dombey said that they had phone records. Steve Jacobson said made a comment about some of his prior statements again, entering the yard with a gate and through the gate and that type of thing. Robert Woody said again, I told you guys, I lied. Again, asked if he had a cell phone in 2012. He's not sure when it went inactive. He was Dombey. He was asked if he knew where Dombey was getting his information in regards to cell records, or if he was just lying. Robert Woody didn't really know, but he said Dombey said that Dombey needed to go over some things to help his memory remember things better. Steve Jacobson said he did do a search of your mind and recall what happened, so they're not accepting what he said. Again, he didn't recall Jacobson saying that. He refreshed with the transcript, and was asked again if it was on the return from a milk run to the church. Woody said yes, that's what the transcript says. He was asked if he had based some of his information in regards to the Johnson Street threats that he now says happened, but he said at the time they didn't. He asked if it was Kim Stout that had reminded him or based it on her statement. He said no. He said, was it possibly another witness? He did not recall talking to anyone else about it. Also, in his preliminary hearing testimony, which they pulled the transcript out, he stated he did not recall going to South Johnson Street and making the threats. Again, that was he reading the transcript. He says it does not refresh his memory, but he's saying now it did happen, but he's saying at the time he didn't remember that happening. And he just doesn't recall the incident on Johnson Street. Dombey said Corey Kaufman kept trying to remind him, and Robert Woody said that he just not have any recall about that stuff at the time. Again, Jacobson asked about Miranda Dyke's body wire, and that information contained that all the things he said trying to impress a girl. And it was asked about cutting off fingers. It was one of the things he said. He said correct. That's all he said was correct. But now, then they asked him this another question. He said, well, I don't recall. So he couldn't recall in court today whether he talked about cutting the fingers off or not. He read the transcript, and it says he does recall now. That's what Jacobson said, but he's not sure if that's what actually he said or not. He also said that he talked about some of the things that were in discovery that he talked about at the time of this interview. And he said he didn't recall having any discovery, but once Hans asked a couple more questions, he said yes, his private investigator did go over some of that information with him. And there was nothing mentioned on the fingers any other time before that meeting. Robert Woody also said prior to that there was a bullet hole in the back, and he said yes, I believe I said that. And they asked if they used Bobby Atwell's pickup to move the body. And originally, apparently, there was some information out that, and I think Woody made a statement that the body was moved in a Mercedes and not the pickup, but then was saying the pickup, and then he said it didn't happen at all, and so now he's saying it's the pickup, and that's why it was burned. Dombey had cast a couple times about the different vehicles that may have been used to move the body. And there was a lot of rumors going around that originally, and at one point they were trying to say it was moved by a sheriff's patrol car or something too at one point. But Woody really wasn't recalling this conversation. But he did, after he reviewed a little bit some of the transcripts from the interview, he said there was a report that said there was a Mercedes that had moved the body. That's where we were at the end of the day. It was a real tedious day. It was tough following this stuff, real dry and real hard to follow along. Woody is real evasive in his answers, and just another thing too. That was all we had today. We're coming back tomorrow. The attorneys are coming back at 9:15. The jury's coming in, I believe, at 10. So that means the judge will be at least a half an hour late. She always does that when the jury's coming in late. I did get a message yesterday by somebody who asked me, what's the benefit of all these witnesses saying they do not recall? And it's a very good question, and probably a lot of people that are wondering that. If a witness does not recall, they can do a refresh, like a transcript or a report or something that'll remind them. But if they still say they don't recall, and there's no other way to refresh it, if the memory is lost, the memory is lost, and the attorneys can't sit there and keep hammering the witnesses or keep asking questions over and over again. That kind of puts an end to the questioning in regards to that. They do. If Woody says, I still don't recall, Hans has been reading into the record what he either testified to or what the report says, what he said and did at the time. But that's it. You can't keep asking questions. You can't beat up on a witness if he can't recall. And that's the benefit. And all these witnesses have been briefed very well on this. And they've all used the exact same term, I don't recall. They don't say I can't remember, it escapes me at the time. They don't say anything. They all say I don't recall. Don't recall. So they've been briefed real well on this. So that's where we're at. Again, like I said, tomorrow, 10 o'clock for the jury, which will be later. The attorneys are supposed to be at 9:15, which will be later when the judge gets there late. She was stuck in traffic again this morning. And keep in mind, I have a donation button on the bottom of each report to PayPal. There's my home address. My post office box address is on the website. You can send donations, make checks out to Marty Carlson Services. Donations have been steady. I appreciate it. All I'm trying to do is pay the bills here. That's all I'm trying to do. And I have a sponsor, Merced Tile Supply. Talk to Doug down there. He does a good job. A good guy. He knows what he's doing. He's been in the business a long time. He did installations and stuff for a long time, and now he's selling supplies. So talk to Doug down there. He'll help you out. Quite a few people in court today compared to normal, and that's good to see. People need to see what's going on in these courtrooms. And like I always say, don't take my word for it. Come to court and find out for yourself. Good night, everybody.